Hey everyone, thanks for clicking on this video. If you weren't aware, this review of Ratchet Deadlocked follows the videos I've done in the original Ratchet and Clank Trilogy, so if you missed those, it's definitely worth catching up. If you were a part of my Patreon, you could have seen this video several weeks ago as it was finished before my review of Ratchet 1 even dropped. Right now, you can join for as low as $1 and get the final review in this series, Ratchet and Clank Size Matters. But if we reach $200 a month, that will be followed by a re-review of Secret Agent Clank. Having said that, let's just get into the video. This is a game I have a lot of nostalgia for. There was an ad for this game on the reverse side of the manual for Ratchet 3, and back in 2008 I had that on the floor where I played games, and I was asked if I had that one or not, and I just said no. Lo and behold, I get this game for my birthday a couple weeks later. By this point, I was a solidified fan of the series, having played the crap out of Ratchet 2 and 3, and now I had gotten another game to add to that list. Ratchet Deadlocked has always been a game I liked, having played it several times now, with it completing my trinity of Ratchet. 2, 3, and Deadlocked, my 3 favorite games in the series. However, Deadlocked from the offset was in a much different position going into it than any of the previous games. I mentioned in the last video and in other videos that third entries in video game franchises are usually more well received than those of movies. But it is worth mentioning that not every franchise follows that basic progression of the first game introduces concepts, the second game fixes what didn't work, and the third one refines all those elements. I mean, Devil May Cry's second game is a disaster that plays nothing like the first one, so the second one is basically DMC 3. Some older franchises jumped to 3D a couple of games in, like Zelda or Metal Gear, and they were able to continue expanding upon that in the coming games. My point is just that when doing video games, it's often more clear for the people behind them how they should go from game 1 to 2 to 3 than it is in movies. But that model I just mentioned does describe the Ratchet and Clank trilogy to a T, which leads into Ratchet Deadlocked and the thing the video is named after, the fourth game problem. This is something I'd say a lot of developers experience. By the time you reach game 3, especially in a series that has stayed consistent from the start, you have to ask what exactly you can do to keep the series fresh, since recycling the third game over and over is probably not going to work. For the Ratchet and Clank series, Up Your Arsenal had the most refined combat controls and storytelling the series had seen, and as far as PS2 games were concerned, that was about as good as it was going to get. So for the last Ratchet and Clank game Insomniac did for the PlayStation 2, they decided to shake it up with Ratchet Deadlocked. A game you can probably tell is much different from the offset given the fact that Clank's name got dropped from the title, something that the Jak and Daxter series did when it wanted to go for a darker approach in Jak 2. Of course, it should go without saying that I'm playing the game on the PlayStation 2 once again, although I got pretty scared at first because the game crashed twice in my first 30 minutes of playing, once when creating my save file and the second time when selecting Catacrom 4 for the first time. But after that, it was smooth sailing. I didn't bring attention to the HD collection in the Ratchet 3 video because I didn't think it was necessary since all the major gripes were brought up in the videos in Ratchet 1 and 2. For Deadlocked, I think it's worth mentioning once again because this game wasn't even on the HD collection, it was just the original trilogy, although to apologize for the second delay of the PS Vita port of Ratchet Full Frontal Assault, fans who bought the game expecting to have Vita crossplay features got a PS3 HD port of Ratchet Deadlocked for free. I'm not sure if they were planning on doing Deadlocked HD the whole time or not, or just rushed this out because of that Full Frontal Assault Vita delay, but either way, Ratchet Deadlocked HD exists on PS3 and I'd say it's the worst of the 4, and one of the worst PS2 HD ports I've ever seen. No Comic Sans text in this game, but the cutscenes have been fundamentally ruined because the in-game scenes are constantly skipping frames and it looks really jittery. Then there's what they did to Vox's teeth in this scene, and Ratchet's face in this scene, or Ace's visor in the cutscenes. And that's basically all I need to really say it sucks. And while I feel like that's a harsh statement, it's how I feel. Like I had said before, I've never made a video game remaster in my life, so I'm sure the time and budget constraints are tough to deal with. In fact, this is why I'd never want to make a video game for a big company if my life depended on it. But still, I have a choice between playing the game on PS2 and PS3, and I'm going to go with PS2 where it has the usual progressive scan and faux 16:9 options I brought up 2 videos ago. This game was actually one of the reasons why my original retrospective used the HD collection, when I did all PS2 footage for the old Sly and Jak videos. And the reason given was because my discs for Ratchet 1 and Deadlocked just did not work on PS2. You could ask why I didn't just replace them, and the answer is that I was 15 and had no fucking money. Damn, I do not miss that. I mean, it was a crowning achievement when I got $60 to spend on a used copy of Metal Gear Solid The Twin Snakes back in 2016, and I still have that to this day. I actually got these new copies of Ratchet 1, Deadlocked, and I believe Up Your Arsenal at the Too Many Games convention in 2016. Good memories, I must say. Anyway, I'm getting off topic like I always do. Let's dive into Ratchet Deadlocked. The game begins after the events of Up Your Arsenal with Ratchet, Clank, and Al taking care of the starship Phoenix when they're suddenly captured by a host of an illegal combat sport in the Shadow Sector called Dread Zone. The show is based around capturing heroes and making them fight through a horde of enemies and the lethal exterminators consisting of Shellshock, Reactor, the Eviscerator, and the former galactic hero Ace Hardlight. Ratchet, Clank, and Al form Team Darkstar alongside their new combat bots Merc and Green. Ratchet has to do this one alone, with Clank helping him over the radio and Al doing robotic repairs for the combat bots. Dread Zone is run by Gleeman Vox, owner of the Vox News Network, who will do anything for ratings, including sacrificing the lives of anyone who works for him. And that includes the contestants on Dread Zone, as the game opens with a hero, Captain Starshield, being killed by Ace Hardlight, and now it's up to Ratchet to survive the gauntlet and escape. This game is pretty hardcore, and that doesn't just stop at the premise. The music is the usual Ratchet style of sample mixing, but this time it just has this edge to it that makes it a blast to listen to both in and out of the game. I felt the music showcase was necessary this time, as I think the tone of the soundtrack is just a part of showing this game's identity. In general, the game is very slick. Just look at the HUD, black and red, much better than that orange abomination from Ratchet 3. But if you don't like that, you can change the color of the HUD in the extras menu. Black goes good with just about anything, but I decided to keep it themed to my channel and made it green. Green isn't even my favorite color, but it works for today. To be able to change the color of the HUD, you need to first unlock that feature with skill points, something I haven't really mentioned thus far in the series. This is basically like modern day achievements where you get skill points for doing specific in-game activities and challenges, something Insomniac started in the Spyro games that made its way into Ratchet and Clank. Like on Iridia from Ratchet 1, you get a skill point for making it through these grapple points without touching the ground. These usually aren't an important part of the game for me, but they are in Deadlocked, as I'll spend the early game doing as many of them as I can, like going through the whole mission without using a particular weapon, or shooting down this many cameras, because doing that will unlock the helmetless Ratchet skin. Ratchet's new armor in this game looks pretty cool, but the fact that it covers his face doesn't really do it for me. Never liked using the most expensive armors in this series, since I don't like Ratchet's face being covered. For a character like Ratchet, facial expression is just a part of relating to him. I mean, why do you think he doesn't wear a helmet on the box? Think of the difference between Mega Man X and the faceless Vile from the first game, and I think my point is made about what a face can add to a character. If you're wondering why I'm bringing this up, it'll be important later, so keep it in the back of your mind.
We'll see.
Ratchet Deadlocked takes the formula from the arena combat in Ratchet 2 and 3 and expands this to a full game. Each planet just serves as a place to fight enemies and do missions with bolt rewards for each one completed. You have access to about 2 planets at a time. Each planet has its own campaign of missions you must do, and then optional ones you can do for more points. Once the 2 planets unlocked are beaten, you then gain access to the tournament where you beat one of the exterminators and get access to a new rank, a new armor, and new planets. Rinse and repeat until the game is done. Ratchet 3 was already dropping the pretense of this being a platforming series with more TPS gameplay, but Deadlocked can't be called a platformer at all, really. Each planet just sees you performing tasks relating to fighting enemies. On principle, I don't think Ratchet should lean into the TPS direction as much as Deadlocked does, but for one game I think it works. And it's not even really like I miss the stuff that's gone that much. Like hacking gadgets, I don't really like playing those. Clank sections, I think those suck, so good riddance. On that note, I've come to realize what the gap between me and the people who like Ratchet 1 the most is. For me, I always felt like the weapons and combat was the best part of Ratchet and Clank, so by that metric, each game was better than the last. But if you enjoyed the planet-to-planet exploration, tough platforming, and NPC interactions, I can see why you'd be pretty let down by the likes of Ratchet 3. When getting into the combat itself, the controls in Deadlocked are just as good as they were in Ratchet 3, with the lock strafe mode now being the default control scheme. First person still exists and is probably at its most useful in this game, since platforming's not really a thing this time around, but I think lock strafe is superior since I get a better view of my surroundings with it. Third person's also there if you're used to the controls of Ratchet 2, but again, shooting with R1 allows you to shoot while controlling the camera in all directions. There's really no competition for that. Especially for this game where, like I said, combat is the biggest priority. The weapon roster is by far the smallest it's been in the series up to this point, but I don't think that takes anything away from the roster. The last 3 games have a bunch of weapons I don't really use that much given how powerful everything else in the game is, but in Deadlocked, they keep the roster down to only the essentials, like the Dual Vipers, the best blaster weapon the series has ever seen. I mean, it's got excellent damage output, a fast rate of fire, and there are 2 of them. When fully upgraded, your shots will bounce all over the walls in a colorful display. It's great to use, especially with this sound design. I do have issues with some of the weapons in this game, like how the Magma Blaster is probably the weakest shotgun weapon thus far, but it still proves useful on many occasions. The B6 Obliterator is a bomb-type weapon with a more limited range than previous games that gets outclassed by the Hunter Mine Launcher later in the game, a bomb that locks onto enemies. And the mini turret gun takes too long to fire in between each toss, reducing its usefulness. But the list of positives for Deadlocked's roster of weapons is much longer than the cons list. For example, are there any Ratchet weapons nearly as fun to use as the Scorpion Flail? It's a ball and chain that you smash onto the ground and it destroys everything around you. It's so much fun to use to the point where its singular function never gets old. Or take the Fusion Rifle, for example. It's everything great about the Flux Rifle from Ratchet 3, just with an aiming reticle, making it the ultimate weapon of destruction, which is something funny I noticed. In my review of Ratchet 1, I praised the fact that the weapons stay useful for the entire game, but then in my review of Ratchet 2, I praised the early weapons being outclassed by the later ones, forcing you to buy new ones. But then Ratchet 3 finds a more balanced middle ground and I praised that. In that game, I praised the Sniper for not having a reticle, and now here I am praising Ratchet Deadlocked for having one. It sounds like I'm just tripping over my old statements, but in reality, Ratchet 1 had a system that was working, but then Ratchet 2 made it better, and then Ratchet 3 made it even better, and now Ratchet Deadlocked finds a way to make its sniper rifle mechanics more fun than in Ratchet 3. The Fusion Rifle tore through boss health bars and regular enemies to the point where it was the weapon I maxed out the level ups for first. Although maybe that's because I picked the contestant difficulty. I started on the gladiator difficulty, but then I got my ass kicked, like 3 deaths on the first real mission. I noped out of that one and went down to contestant. Good thing you can change your difficulty whenever you load your save file. It allows you to more easily experiment with it. But I mentioned leveling up weapons, so let's get back to that. The maximum capacity for level ups is level 10 as opposed to 5. In the previous games, you'd get a weapon to the maximum level and then you'd stop using it because you'd rather upgrade as many weapons as you possibly can, as damage done with maxed out weapons is damage not spent on upgrades. To explain what I mean in a practical sense, in Ratchet 2, you start with the Lancer and the Gravity Bomb. I upgraded the Lancer to the Heavy Lancer by the second stage. Any enemies I killed with that upgraded version came with the cost of enemies I could have killed with the Gravity Bomb to further upgrade that one. Level 10 upgrades make your weapons feel useful for the entire playthrough, as you'll never be in the position where you aren't leveling them up. This kind of sounds like I'm saying it's difficult, but instead I'm just saying that the smaller amount of weapons all get their time in the sun because there's no point where they won't be useful to the upgrade system since it takes longer to upgrade them all, while still being just as satisfying to do as it was in Ratchet 3. Although I don't like your upgrades not refilling your ammo. I thought that was just because Rift Apart did that, which I just played, but looking at my Up Your Arsenal footage, and that game did that as well. But that's a small issue. This game introduces the mechanics of Alpha and Omega mods for your weapons. Alpha mods are a much simpler version of the Raritanium upgrades you get in later games. By level 10, you'll have several Alpha mod slots, and you can configure which Alpha mods your weapons will have, such as increased ammo or a better lock-on. The system is customizable and feels tangible in the gameplay, like this part in the grind rails of the planet Kronos. I was having trouble hitting these enemies with my dual Vipers because I sacrificed a lock-on Alpha mod for more ammo, and I changed it back and I was able to hit with much more precision. Omega mods are purchasable from the shop and allow you to give your weapons increased effects, like freezing them with the Freeze mod, or my favorite, shocking them with the Shock mod. The Shock mod also damages nearby enemies with electricity, which makes it a must-have. With Omega mods, you can fix an issue I mentioned earlier. The B6 Obliterator gets outclassed by the Hunter Mine Launcher, but you can give each different Omega mod so that the Obliterator drops fire all around your enemies, and then have the Hunter Mine Launcher turn into several smaller bombs like the Bouncer. Like I said, this game has a small roster of weapons, but all of them are useful in some capacity. But those aren't the only tools in your arsenal though. When playing this game in single player, you have Merc and Green at your side. Normally they just fire at your enemies alongside you, but you can command them to do things for you like turn bolt cranks, toss an EMP at turrets, or launch a grind cable with a press of a D-pad button. Once you've gotten all the weapons for yourself, you can spare some bolts on upgrades for these guys like better weapons, armor, or the shield charger, where one of them will put a shield around the other when he's doing a task, so the task bot won't take damage. Although buying this does make it take longer for them to hack nodes because only one of them is doing the hacking as opposed to both of them doing that. Although, now you only have to protect one of them at a time, so it's kind of a trade-off, but I'd say it's worth getting. They don't do much on paper, but the trailer makes note of them being much more useful and powerful than the Galactic Ranger bots from Ratchet 3, and you definitely feel that. These guys even made it on the front cover of the US box art, and they were the main attraction in the commercials for the game. When one of their missions in the late game is to rescue them, you actually feel like you're weaker without them, giving the mission some urgency. This game brings the multiplayer element from Ratchet 3 back, and I can't really comment on it this time. I barely played this as a kid, and the servers are dead like I said in the last video, so I can't even play it now. But the game does have an offline co-op feature where a friend will replace Merc and Green, Jack even being playable in the co-op. One day I'd like to play this game in co-op with a fellow Ratchet and Clank fan and see how much the dynamic of the game changes with that. But that's pretty much all I can say on the core gameplay loop of Deadlocked, and while it seems significantly cut back from the previous games, I don't mind it for one game. And besides that, the game also has a fully fleshed out storyline which is not to be slept on. The basic premise is interesting on its face, but the humor makes it even better. This game being the last Ratchet to really have this satirical sense of humor, and it's a great way for that style of writing to go out. The villain is the owner of a massive media corporation, as Vox has to deal with the fact that his star player, Ace Hardlight, is losing popularity because the fans think he's a douche. And because of that, he has boxes of unsold Ace Hardlight merchandise while the kids want Ratchet figures now. Since the game is framed around Ratchet competing on a TV show, the whole game is commented on by Dallas and Juanita. You could complain about them using the same audio clips all the time in gameplay.
Run, Ratchet, run! Run, Ratchet, run!
But I'm just going to headcanon that these two are just shit at their jobs and can't come up with any new commentary. But anyway, this is where a lot of the satire comes from, as Ratchet keeps gaining popularity the more you play the game. So Vox News has Dallas and Juanita slander Ratchet as much as they can just to make sure the audience isn't on his side and thus prop up Ace Hardlight so they can sell more merch based on him.
This year's contestants include the notorious mafia crime boss known as Ratchet, seen here at his Mokhtar estate.
And to think that other networks actually call him a hero.
It's truly sad, Dallas.
After making his fortune selling cigarettes to children, Ratchet went on to pilot a tanker ship for Zexon.
A week later, Ratchet got drunk and crashed his tanker into the ocean world of Equados.
Our challenger, known for his exploits in organized crime, his dabbling in the occult, and his hatred of sunshine, puppies, and chocolate, here's Ratchet!
Similar to Ratchet 3, hero worship is a major theme in this game, told through Ace Hardlight. A rivalry between him and Ratchet is built up throughout the game, as Ratchet begins the story thinking that becoming a famous gladiator on this show could be cool, until he sees a former hero he once admired like Ace Hardlight gleefully getting rich off the deaths of other heroes at his own hands.
Why would a hero kill other heroes for money?
Not money, Tin Man. Fun.
I do not understand.
You traitor! Do you think this is some kind of game? That's exactly what it is, Furball. And you're going to be the star of my highlight reel. I'll see you soon, Lombax.
This leads to a cutscene in the middle of the game where Team Darkstar tries to escape, but Ace himself mortally wounds Al, forcing Ratchet back into the competitions after this cutscene.
This never should have happened. It's all my fault. No, Ratchet. Ace Hardlight did this, and Gleeman Vox gave the order. They made a mistake bringing us here, Clank. Now they're gonna pay for it. Exactly.
The game isn't hiding anything here. The characters are in a really screwed up situation, and I like that about this story. If any contestant on Dread Zone becomes uncooperative, or worse, boring, Vox has the ability to kill you with the press of a button.
Observe.
I hate this job.
You could make the case that the whole "you will die" stakes is a cheap way to up the drama without having to earn it, but in this game I think it works towards the larger statement.
Fans of Dread Zone, I share your pain for the loss of the mighty Ace Hardlight. I encourage you all to express your grief and sympathy by purchasing this limited edition Ace Hardlight Memorial Action figure, on sale now for only 299 bolts.
Ace Hardlight is only a hero on Vox News because Vox wants that. Ultimately, every star in the arena is disposable. I mean, when you do beat Ace Hardlight, he realizes now that he's about to die, that Vox is just gonna throw him aside and try to make Ratchet the new star. Which literally happens in the very next scene.
I'm about to offer you the opportunity of 1,000 lifetimes. I'm making you the new captain of the Exterminators, the star of the show. Think of it. We'll make billions. We'll sell Ratchet action figures, Ratchet sports shoes, Ratchet deodorant, Ratchet breakfast cereal, earmuffs and cologne, soft drinks, hard drinks, energy drinks, breath mints. You'll get record deals, movie rights, reality shows, video games, and commercials.
Ace took Vox's offer of fame and fortune, tossing integrity aside, but Ratchet does what a real hero would.
No deal, Vox.
What did you say?
I'm not your puppet, Vox. You actually think I'd kill other heroes to get rich? You're not just corrupt, you're stupid.
Overall, I think Ratchet Deadlocked has the potential to be really repetitive because you just fight enemies, but it avoids that by telling a really engaging story with that great satire and point. The galaxy's not at stake in this game, it's the characters' lives, and that's just as captivating. The gameplay keeps itself fresh with a decent amount of mission variety, like destroying targets or having different conditions like a speed increase or weapons changing at random. I really liked this mission where you only had access to your wrench, and I had to find ways for the enemies to damage each other by moving in a way that would put the enemies in the line of fire of other enemies. It's a game that will more than hold your attention for its entire runtime, is what I mean to say. But I still don't enjoy vehicle sections that much. The hover ship, the Puma, and the hover bike are fine to use, although turning was really awkward since each one uses a twin stick setup as opposed to buttons being how you control the vehicles. But I just enjoy playing the regular missions more because I can upgrade my weapons. Although you can still upgrade your HP in these missions, so that's nice. It's the Landstalker that I never look forward to using. The movement is slow, the guns aren't satisfying to use, and it's put to use in the worst missions in the game where you have to reach a certain number of targets before the course is over, and I feel like you can barely defend yourself from the enemies. The only part of Ratchet Deadlocked that stands out to me for poor pacing would be unlocking the penultimate final stage, the Ghost Ship. After you take out Ace Hardlight, the game gets you hyped up for the death course in the Ghost Ship.
In accordance with Dread Zone Regulation C6-5/9, paragraph 2, Ratchet has been sentenced to meet his fate on the Gauntlet of Doom! This special event will be broadcast live tomorrow night only on Dread Zone!
But then you need a shit ton of dread points to even unlock the stage, so I had to go back to the Battle Dome and do a bunch of optional missions to get said dread points. The only time I ever felt stonewalled in Deadlocked. But that doesn't take away from the climax feeling really intense. Since Ratchet doesn't want to be made a star, Vox keeps upping the stakes, concluding with the final levels where Ratchet, Clank, and the newly robotic Al form a plan to escape by first freeing all the heroes trapped in the station, which Vox uses as a chance for ratings as he rigged the Battle Dome to explode if Ratchet fails. Dallas and Juanita are even equipped with deadlock collars and completely go off script and root for you to win. That's good drama from a story context where the last levels were kinda lame. I mean, you go through 3 stages where the objective is the same, run through these hallways, defeating enemies and blowing up generators. Like I said before, you could say this game's repetitive, which I wouldn't for most planets, but these last levels just felt like they went on too long. Then there's the final boss, which absolutely kicked my ass. Vox has a lot of attacks that make use of all your weapons, like his lasers that I put up the hollow shield for, or his enemy spawns that I clear with the scorpion flail and do damage on Vox himself with the Arbiter, the fusion rifle, and the dual Vipers, just feeling like I barely have enough ammo to take him down. It's a really good fight, as Ratchet leaves Vox to die in an explosion of his own making as all the heroes escape, ending Ratchet Deadlocked. Of course, there's the usual challenge mode to play where you do the game again, only with added perks like a bolt multiplier. This time around you can buy Omega versions of weapons you've leveled up to 10 and upgrade them even further. The twist being that this time you can level them up to level 99. And these upgrades come really fast, making you feel really powerful. Getting the dual Vipers up by like 3 levels in one mission. And then there's the super weapon, the Harbinger. This will fire several missiles into the air and have lasers rain down from the sky and do tons of damage. Although I noticed that this one starts a little weak on enemies and bosses, where it needs to be leveled up to do better damage and have more ammo. By contrast, I felt like the Rhinos were all really powerful the second you got them in the previous 3 games. However, now that we've reached the end of the video, there are some pretty interesting things to say about Deadlocked 16 years after it was released. I've always loved this game. Whenever I set out to do another replay of the classic Ratchet games, it's not even a question about whether or not this one is included. These 4 games together represent some of my most nostalgic gaming memories, having watched the characters grow and change with each one and going back and replaying Ratchet 1 and seeing where the series started out. But like I said, Deadlocked is an interesting game in hindsight because it turns out Insomniac doesn't really see it that way. When speaking about this game on a dev panel in 2018, they regard Deadlocked as a pretty critical misstep for the series. I mean, these devs were so stressed out about the release of Ratchet 3, but that faith was rewarded with high sales and critical acclaim. But Deadlocked received lower scores in sales than Up Your Arsenal. It's hard to say if this was historical revisionism or not, but it's the only official source in existence, so I'm gonna have to believe it. The way they see it, Deadlocked was an attempt to grab interest based upon the 2000s trends towards things being darker. This is why I brought up Jak 2 earlier, as you could say not having Clank with Ratchet in gameplay is a part of that effort to look more serious, as is covering Ratchet's face like he's the Master Chief or something. When I play Deadlocked, I don't feel like its tone is that much of a departure from the previous ones, although I guess you could say the satire is more cynical in Deadlocked than it was in Up Your Arsenal, but I feel like you could make the same case for Megacorp in Going Commando. I don't know, it was just something I had never considered prior to hearing them say that. Whether they're right or wrong about what caused Deadlocked to do worse than Ratchet 3, it did lead them to believe that experimenting with Ratchet's formula was a mistake, or at least experimenting without a few key elements. They looked at Up Your Arsenal and made a checklist of things the series needed to be a true Ratchet and Clank game going forward, Captain Quark humor being one of those things that Deadlocked did not have. Even though, again, in my opinion, I don't really feel like Deadlocked loses anything. I don't feel like Captain Quark has a place in this story. But knowing their perspective on this explains pretty well why Tools of Destruction, the next game Insomniac did, turned out the way it did. It was trying to be like Ratchet 3, but in HD with a more cinematic story. So in a way, Ratchet Deadlocked and the fourth game problem led to Tools of Destruction and the consequences that game caused the series for years to come, because Tools of Destruction itself was a direct response to Deadlocked. But I'm never going to hold that over this game's head because I think it's a lot of fun and has everything I liked about the previous games, and its own unique identity, which makes it an easy choice when I think of games to replay. But that's enough for today. We're almost done with the re-review series, as next week we're going to be covering Ratchet and Clank Size Matters, which you can get right now for as low as $1 on Patreon. If not, I'll see you next week. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Ratchet, Clank, it's me, Captain Quark. There's a nasty rumor going around about heroes being kidnapped, but don't worry, it's baloney. I mean, come on, nobody came to capture me, right? Just imagine making a show about galactic heroes without Captain Quark. Ha! Well, anyway, you guys missed the last 3 meetings of the Quark Cadets fan club. But don't worry, I've got extra copies of the newsletter, and I even saved some of the snacks. Hope you like custard.